By 1754, it was clear that conflict between Britain and France in North America was inevitable. Both European powers had laid claim to the vast majority of the continent, and with neither willing to back down, war was the only option left. But while the French and Indian War would ultimately be decided in Europe, where both sides committed massive resources to destroying the other, it was the indigenous nations who would prove most critical in determining the outcome of the conflict. Hello and welcome to this channel. Today we're going to look at how Native Americans helped the British win the French and Indian War. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and remember to leave a like and share this episode with anyone who might enjoy this type of content. You can follow me on social media or check out my blog for more episodes. So without further ado, let's get started. While the French and Indian War is today remembered as a conflict between Britain and France, the reality is that both sides were aided by a multitude of different allies. The conflicts in North America were part of a larger global war known as the 7 Years' War, and as such, both Britain and France drew in resources from all over the world to fight their battles. The primary motivation behind both sides in the war was control of the Ohio Valley. This region, rich in natural resources, was contested by both powers and was increasingly desired by each as the potential for settlement and wealth grew. As such, when the British began encroaching into lands claimed by the French, war soon followed. For the British, the war effort was led by the Virginia governor, William Dunbar, who raised a militia force to drive the French from the Ohio Valley. However, they were soon overwhelmed by French forces and retreated to safety, while the British struggled to make any headway against the French. The situation was about to change dramatically. Just a year later, in 1755, the British East India Company would dispatch 2,000 soldiers from its army in India to assist in the war effort. Known as the Regulators, these troops were sent to aid the British in capturing Fort Necessity, a mission which would result in the first major British victory of the war. Unfortunately for the British, they once again became embroiled in controversy, as their actions during the siege resulted in the deaths of dozens of civilians. Nevertheless, victories like this were just what the British needed, and the tide began to turn in their favor. By 1756, however, it was clear that if Britain were to stand any chance of defeating the French, they would need help. Fortunately for them, they were about to get exactly that, in the form of one of the largest navies in the world. As the war in North America raged on, it quickly became apparent to the British Admiralty that naval power alone would not be enough to defeat the French. They needed land-based support as well. With this in mind, the Royal Navy dispatched a massive fleet of warships to the New World, consisting of 8,000 troops. Led by the Earl of Loudon, the Royal Navy's goal was simple: capture the city of Quebec, and with it, control of Canada. However, this proved easier said than done. As the British advanced into Canada, they were met by fierce resistance from French troops and their Native American allies. Despite being outnumbered, the French and Native Americans were able to hold off the British for nearly 2 years. But with the British Navy dominating the seas, supplies and reinforcements were able to reach the British forces, allowing them to eventually overwhelm the French. However, as the British advanced further into Canada, they were once again met by fierce resistance. By 1759, the British were growing weary of the war. It was becoming clear that defeating the French would take longer than anticipated, and the cost of maintaining an army in North America was becoming increasingly expensive. As such, the British looked for a way to end the war quickly, and they found it in the form of a preemptive strike on the French city of Quebec. Under the command of James Wolfe, the British landed just outside of Quebec, and began constructing a series of fortifications. This would allow them to lay siege to the city and force the French to surrender. However, as the British advanced, they were once again met by fierce resistance from the French and Native Americans. Despite heavy losses, the British were able to hold their ground, and on September 13, 1759, they captured the city of Quebec. This victory would prove to be the turning point of the war. With their main stronghold in North America now in British hands, the French were forced to retreat. But as the British pursued the retreating French, they once again found themselves facing fierce resistance from Native American allies of the French. While the British had been able to defeat the French in open battle, they were less successful against the elusive Native Americans. These warriors were able to evade the British and strike at them with hit-and-run tactics, causing heavy casualties. For the British, this proved to be a costly mistake, as the Native Americans were now suffering heavy losses due to disease brought over from Europe. Smallpox, measles, and other diseases were devastating Native American populations, leading to a sharp decline in their numbers. As such, the British began to target these warriors in an attempt to weaken the French war effort. Despite these setbacks, the British were able to continue their advance into French territory, and in 1760 they captured Montreal, effectively ending the war in North America. The last vestige of French power in the region would fall just 2 years later with the capture of Louisiana. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1763, officially ended the war and recognized British dominance in North America. The French and Indian War had far-reaching consequences for the future of North America. Perhaps the most significant of these was the emergence of the United States as a major power on the continent. The war had drained the British treasury, and the colonists had grown accustomed to a degree of self-government. During the conflict, as such, the British were less able and perhaps even less willing to exert control over the colonies after the war. This, combined with the growing desire for independence among the colonists, would set the stage for the American Revolution just a few years later. However, the war would also have a profound impact on the indigenous peoples of North America. During the conflict, many Native Americans had sided with the French in the hopes that they would be able to maintain their way of life. However, the British victory would result in the displacement of many tribes and the loss of millions of acres of tribal land. Despite this, some Native American tribes would continue to resist British rule for decades to come. While the French and Indian War would ultimately be won by the British, it was far from a decisive victory. In fact, the war had nearly bankrupted the British, and they were eager to end their involvement in North America as quickly as possible. As such, the British began to withdraw their troops from the region, leaving behind only a small garrison to maintain order. This, combined with the growing tensions between the colonists and the British government, would set the stage for the American Revolution. In the aftermath of the war, the British government attempted to assert greater control over the colonies. They imposed a series of new taxes and regulations, which the colonists saw as a violation of their rights. This, combined with the growing influence of Enlightenment ideas, would lead to a full-blown rebellion by the end of the decade. The French and Indian War had a profound impact on the history of North America. The victory by the British would have far-reaching consequences for the future of the continent. And while the British were ultimately victorious, the war would ultimately be the catalyst for the American Revolution. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and remember to leave a like and share this episode with anyone who might enjoy this type of content. You can follow me on social media or check out my blog for more episodes. Thanks for watching.